Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Middle Path Radio. I'm Kamal Hussein and welcome to Straight Talk. This evening we will be discussing the war on Syria. Over 250,000 Syrians have lost their lives in 4.5 years of armed conflict, coming up to 5 years. And more than 11 million have been forced from their homes as Bashar al-Assad and those opposed to his rule battle each other. Now the focus of the war has shifted and is on the self-claimed Khilafah or Caliphate, ISIS. The coalition of the countries like Russia, France and USA and the allies are relentlessly bombing Syria to take out ISIS. And now we have the British involvement too. So tonight we want to discuss exactly what is happening in Syria and what are the real problems and issues surrounding this war, and most importantly the impact on Muslims living in the West. We want to look at the media coverage, public reactions and MPs and government's stance. So please join in and take part in this important discussion. Call or text 07477 080248, or you can tweet us at Middle Path Radio. To discuss this issue, we have in the studio our regular contributors to this show, alhamdulillah. I'd like to welcome brothers back, Brother Qudus Ali, our solicitor, and Abdul Samad, our political activist. Thank you for joining us, brothers. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Can I start by asking you, brothers, what are your views on the war on Syria? Was Britain right to join the bombing campaign? Can you give us a background to what is happening? We have some technical issues. Okay, all right, go for it.
Jazakallah khair for the invitation to your studio again.
Barakallah fi.
Basically on this issue, it's really difficult to just have a subjective and a personal view. So I would like to give you some background information that we can share with your listeners.
Please do.
Inshallah. Because without understanding some background information, it's extremely difficult to really kind of bring the jigsaw together in understanding this issue. So if I could take you back about maybe 100 years and to the First World War.
We've got 1 hour, but you can try.
So if you look at the First World War and even before that, you'll see that the Muslim world had something called the Caliphate, the Khilafah under the Ottoman Empire. And even that was regarded by the West as a sick man of Europe. So basically, First World War was a war where the Khilafah was destroyed on the 3rd of March 1924. And Britain and France obviously were instrumental in the destruction of the Khilafah. America at the time wasn't a huge international player. They were just entering the international
So it wasn't a superpower,
It wasn't a superpower then. It was more Britain and the Europe.
British
Empire and the European empires. So basically we had an agreement that was concluded, because you're talking about Syria, so I want to take you back to this agreement that was entered into between Britain and France, known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It's everywhere.
Okay.
In terms of from an evidential point of view, all you need to do is Google Sykes-Picot. You will come up with all the information about the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
So you'd advise our listeners to maybe...
Yeah, they need to look into this. They can look into this. If they go to Google and put Sykes-Picot, insert Sykes-Picot, type in Sykes-Picot, it will come out with the agreement and when it was actually concluded.
Okay.
And the gist of the agreement was essentially to have control and influence over the Muslim lands. And to curve Muslim lands, and it was basically split into parts effectively to have control over. So
they drew nationalistic borders, so separated.
That's correct. Absolutely, because during the Uthmani Khilafah, there was no such thing as nation states. The borders were not there. If you look at it from a creation point of view, when this earth was created, there was no such thing as a border. The borders were actually imposed on and created by the West. So the lands were split between the two countries. They entered into a private, secret agreement, Britain and France. So Syria was part of the French control, and Iraq was under the British control.
So they carved up the lands. And they obviously France took some parts, Britain took some parts.
That's correct, and that's right. And Lebanon was also under French control.
Okay. So
now we can understand how and why it's so important for Britain and the West to now engage in war. Yeah. So this is what happened, and for the Muslims, again, just a background information. There was no such thing as Syria, Iraq, Palestine, or Jerusalem. They were all part of known as Asham, and Asham was the third holy place and holy mosque of the Muslims was in Palestine, as we know, in Jerusalem, the Masjid al-Aqsa. And that was part of the Ottoman Khilafah, obviously. And Omar ibn al-Khattab conquered that land, and it was an Islamic land. And it is, until today, it remains a holy land for the Muslim. So why is it so dear to the Muslim, Syria? It's because it's one of the holiest land for the Muslim, and it's dear to them for that reason.
Yeah.
So we have that background into historical information.
Yeah.
So Syria, Assad has been butchering his people for the last 4.5 years.
His father was,
and his father was. They were dictators, and they have been dictators for the last 50 years, oppressing the people of Syria.
So even when they, just to go back, what you've just said is basically when they've carved up the lands, they put dictators or rulers that was theirs in effectively, isn't it?
These were despots that was again placed there, appointed by the West to serve their interest, their political and economic interest. None of these despot tyrannic rulers were ever recognized by the Muslims of those countries, the Ummah. The Ummah did not ever recognize them. First of all, they didn't have the mandate from the Ummah to rule these countries. They were appointed by the West. And I don't want to take you back to another event that took place in Paris. There was an international conference after the First World War, where all the Western rulers met with the despots in France, in Paris, where basically pieces of land and powers were given. So Sharif Hussein's son got now what is known as Oman. Oman is under Sharif Hussein's son ruling, and I think Jordan as well. So
it was given to the Sharif Hussein family, wasn't it?
Yeah, Sharif Hussein.
If you look at the history,
basically those that betrayed, you can say, those that sort of like turned against the Ummah, turned against the Islamic nation, i.e. the Khilafah. I mean, these were obviously on the side of the colonizers, and they basically sold their people, their land, their Ummah for power, for control. And so that's, I think this is what the brother's going on about.
Okay. So just going back again, Britain, does it have the right to join this British the campaign, the bombing campaign?
Can I just add one point to this? I mean, what you can see is like there's been this false argument that Assad is killing his people, he needs to go. This has been the rhetoric coming from the US. I'm not sure if it was so much coming from Britain. Maybe it was.
Well, it was, I think David Cameron made it quite clear, isn't it?
And their reason was the people of Syria. The people, they're resisting this dictator, and it's the right of the people, and so on and so forth. But all of a sudden, it's a dictator now that we're happy to work with now.
Yeah, but if you think about this.
So what happened to the people? The people have now become terrorists, the fundamentalists. So we can see at the end of the day, it's about their look. All this time they've been buying time to find the right man to replace Assad. And with the intervention of Russia, yes, I'm not sure in terms of details, but the fact is they've realized that, if Bashar goes, there's going to be problems. So he's the best they have at the moment. They couldn't, they tried with the Free Syrian Army to find a replacement who will sort of like be loyal to the West and who will serve their Western masters,
Yeah. So initially, if you look at British people, they actually they were against the war on Syria, and their vote there was
another 2 years ago.
Yeah,
there was in Parliament, and it was rejected.
It was because that they were not ready to support Bashar al-Assad. Now it's because of ISIS that they've actually. This is what they're presenting. That look, this is the reason that we're going in, because of ISIS, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, ISIS is a pretext. Just to clarify, because these days, anywhere you talk about ISIS or anyone else for that matter, you have to declare a disclaimer as well, whether you condemn or condone ISIS.
Okay.
Personally, I have got nothing to do with ISIS. I'm concerned and dubious as to who actually created ISIS initially, and obviously I don't want to go into or dwell into that discussion.
We'll come into that later on.
ISIS is a pretext because the British people have been fooled, unfortunately, by the British establishment in justifying this unlawful war on the pretext of ISIS.
So how should Muslim community view the vote on Syria?
Yeah, obviously it's very devastating, unfortunately, for the Muslim community. It's a very sad day, a sad state of affairs for the Muslims, because the implications of that is innocent Muslims all over in Syria their lives will be lost. And
the refugee crisis is obviously something that
has actually been put in the back burner, isn't it? It's been hidden underneath the carpet, and that could be one of the other reasons why they're trying to go in to divert the attention of the people's minds from this refugee crisis.
Why I've said that is basically we found that there was some organization that actually Muslim organization that they wanted to lobby the government, lobby some of the MPs.
You can lobby the MPs; it's not a problem. Mr. Cameron said, "I'll just quote a quote during the speech that he gave as part of the passing for the motion in Parliament." Mm-hmm. He said, "Look, we cannot stand aside and let other countries carry the burden, if not now, when? Throughout history, Britain has defended its values, and we will continue to defend our values and our way of life, and we must do it again."
Yeah,
so these are very profound statements. Yeah, this is a man with a mission.
I'm assuming most of the Muslims, or almost all Muslims, are against this war. Now, David Cameron said the ones who are against the war, they are terrorist sympathizers. Then where do we fit in as Muslims?
Sure, there's thousands and thousands of libertarian in this country, freedom-loving people who are against this war. So where do they fit in? Are they all Jeremy Corbyn being one, and there's many others. The socialist, the SNP leader, Mr. Alex Salmond, he's against the war. So is he also a terrorist sympathizer? And there's many other MPs who have the senior MPs who have backed Mr. Alex Salmond, and they're saying, and they've stressed that David Cameron's claim that ISIS had direct link to the French attack, the Paris attack, is not plausible. Okay. So all of these people, these are intellectual of this society, libertarian, very influential people who are against Mr. Cameron.
Abdul-Samad, you want to come in?
Are they all terrorist sympathizers?
I think it might be worth sort of like trying to distinguish the Muslims, and the Muslims' position in terms of how we oppose the war as like compared to say Salmond or Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, it's sometimes you will find a lot of Muslims, they sort of like join the bandwagon of the left, and they feel somehow if they lobby and they work with these people that they will get.
Because there's something in common with these
yes.
socialists.
But I think it's also important that we need to understand that our perspective is slightly different on this. We oppose this because Islam guides us to this. Islam says, it is forbidden to spill the blood of any human being.
Innocent
human being, yeah. And this is what they're going to do. They're going to go there and they're going to bomb indiscriminately.
Apparently, there was some Muslim MPs that voted for the war. What's our reaction?
Yeah,
what should be the correct reaction?
I mean, this is not new. Actually, we've seen this even with the Iraq War. These are I would call them hypocrites. These people, they come in, and really, it's really sad because these people also get a platform in our masajids, and they get to canvass for, when it comes to time of election, they come in and they play the Muslim card. They'll put on a topi and then they will,
Sure, but
make a nice salam, and then they'll talk about how they will favor Muslims and they will champion the Muslim cause.
Well, unfortunately, they can't.
But when it comes to the situation, the time they buckle. They not only buckle, they really show their true colors, I would say.
But why do you expect anything from these MPs, Muslim MPs? And why should the Ummah, Muslim community?
Because
in this
I think
country,
what Abdul Samad said is basically when they come to you, they say they will represent you.
But then they're fooling the people, unfortunately. See,
they're fooling the Muslims.
Yeah, they're fooling the Muslim. This is why the Ummah, the Muslim community in this country, they need to wake up. Whether they vote for a Muslim MP or a non-Muslim MP is effectively the same thing. Because think about it, under constitutional law and parliamentary law, even the MP, Muslim MP, he's afraid of his whip. He's afraid of his party line, and he cannot toe a line other than the party line, and if he does that he will lose his whip. So he's concerned about his position, he's concerned about his career, and he's concerned about his party's future. So why should Muslims expect anything different from a non-Muslim MP? So this is very important that the Muslim community here are educated, aware about these MPs that they trust and learn, because time and time again they get beaten up in the same hole twice, 3 times, 4 times.
Okay, so does bombing Syria make Britain more safer? As David Cameron supported his case by saying destroying ISIS and this evil ideology will make Britain safe.
Well, I can say, I mean, there's a hypocrisy in what he says. I mean, he's when I think I mentioned this another time, when Russia went in, he actually stated very clearly that this type of indiscriminate bombing is going to radicalize the people, and it's gonna bring harm to the Western nations. But then his argument is 100% like opposite. And he seems to be able to justify that as well, where he says, unless we go and bomb, we're not safe. So really, I mean,
it's all utter nonsense, to be honest. Unfortunately, from an evidential point of view, until today, he hasn't provided. I'm going to come back and give a few other views. But from a English law evidential point of view, under criminal law, there is no link between any of the attacks and coming directly from Syria. Yeah, this is just a fact.
But I think it's
the MPs were not convinced or persuaded by the arguments he put forward. Yeah, they're dubious about his even the security information
what he's saying
from the intelligence are questionable.
What he's saying is that they're bombing Iraq anyway, so it's just crossing over the border, and they can see that ISIS does not recognize the borders. So hence, it's just more bombing, really.
Yeah, but if you think about it, has bombing really solved the problem of in Iraq or Afghanistan? They've been bombing. Remember, Mr. Blair, he also said there was WMD in Iraq, but when they went there, there was no such thing as WMD. So there again, Mr. Cameron is fooling the British people, and British people are not naive and foolish. They also know. If you look at Twitter and if you look at the social media, a lot of think tanks are making comments about this, that this is another pretext to further the control over the Middle East. And it's not about bombing ISIS, but it's about the aftermath of Syria.
Okay,
who's going to be the major player in the discussion and the negotiations of splitting Syria and having control? That's what it's all about. It's about the aftermath.
Okay,
and Britain had to play its role there.
Okay, thank you. I want to maybe look at the Muslim community. Some Muslim would argue that having coalition with Stop the War movements is a good thing and is effective. What do you think?
What do I think? I mean, it's, I welcome anybody who would, argue a case against, invading a nation or killing, civilian people, bombing. It's always the case. I mean, there's, they talk about surgical sort of like strikes and things like this. It's utter nonsense. Yeah, there's no such thing. They kill, men, women, children completely indiscriminately. Yeah. But these are just terms that they use to sort of like kind of like put the mind to rest of the people.
Why I'm saying that, if you look at Stop the War coalitions, there are many organizations, umbrella groups, and they have like different objectives, or they have a criteria that they follow. Yeah. Their measurements is completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so normally they're from the left, and for the Muslims, we need to understand, right? We actually don't fit into that spectrum. Muslims are not the left or the right. Our spectrum is completely different.
We're the middle path.
We're not. We don't even fit into that spectrum. Simple as,
we're not those people who go against the Stop the War coalition and things. These are good things for this country's well-being and having a balanced pluralist view. We're not against that. Just to clarify that we're not against the Stop the War movement and an organization like that. They're sensing a reality. They're sensing injustice and oppression, and they're speaking out against it.
Okay.
And Muslims also are sensing the problem, and they're speaking out against it. But when it comes to reference point, what we take.
But the solution is different, though.
That's right. So when it comes to the solution, this is where Islam.
So what we're talking about, for example, regardless of whether they're left or the right, they actually share the same basis. So what they were asking for is, for example, if Cameron could justify his actions, and if he could present some evidence, and should he present some evidences that Britain will be safer by killing the public in Syria, then they're ready to support that. But the question is, as a Muslim, even at that point, are we willing to support the killing of innocent people in Syria? And there you will see we actually take a different position. So that clearly highlights that we're not the left or the right. We're actually Muslims, and we follow the hukums from Islam. So they will call for the UN. Where's the UN mandate to go and intervene and go and kill and go and invade a nation? And
so the point is, if UN passes a resolution saying it's legitimate and lawful to go to war or send ground troops, should the Muslims support that?
Exactly, this is the question.
Point, isn't it?
That's correct. So Muslim, unfortunately, at that moment cannot support even the United Nations resolution, because then you would have stopped most of the left as well, because they're saying, look, now it's a lawful war, it's justified because the United Nations Security Council has approved it. For that Muslim at that moment, unfortunately, he cannot accept that either, because for him, his criteria, his reference point is Islam, and he will have to refer back to Islam on that. So there is an element of sensation, as my brother says. In principle, those people who sense injustices and oppression around the world, we respect that, but we have our own values, own way of life, and that comes from Islam. Islam dictates, and Islam doesn't justify the killing of any human being unlawfully in a civilian context.
Okay, so Russia is obviously bombing ISIS, and it's also bombing some of the rebel groups who are fighting.
ISIS is a proxy that was actually created by the West. Now, who knows? I mean, if you do any research, you will find that.
When you say created by the West, do you mean because of Iraq and Afghanistan?
After the destruction of Iraq, there was a vacuum, and ISIS, with the assistance of America and Britain, filled that vacuum.
Yeah,
in fact, some of them were trained in the jihadi camps by the Americans.
That's right. The top 15, I believe, commanders of the ISIS were actually in the prisons of the US when they were controlling. When they were occupying Iraq, and so You know, I mean, in terms of details, I mean, we don't know. Obviously, we can make our research and come to whatever conclusion. I mean, there's another interesting point I was looking into. Israel is quite sort of like involved as well. You know, what you'll find is that they're actually treating a lot of the wounded. You know,
and that's from your research.
Yeah, from my research, yes. They're treating a lot of the wounded in Israel itself, and
Well,
ISIS fighters.
Interesting.
And they're trying to keep that sort of like you know,
assistance going.
Yes,
yeah, I mean,
yes,
it's quite strange because
ISIS
have never threatened Israel or Palestine, even though you will find that most of the Al-Qaeda or any terrorist group, they are always threatening.
So whose proxy is
Israel.
it? I mean, it's anybody's guess. I don't know. I mean, but definitely the ISIS there is not representing the Syrians, not representing the Muslim Ummah at large. They're definitely, you know, a proxy of the Western powers.
So is ISIS a real threat? Is it about ISIS, or is there more to what we see?
It's not about ISIS.
It's
definitely.
not about
if you
ISIS,
look at Mr.
yeah?
Bush, I'll take you back about 10 years. Do you remember 2002, 2001?
2 or 3, yeah.
At that time, he declared war on terror. Do you remember?
Yeah.
War on terror, he declared. Again, you know, how can you declare war on an adjective, the word terrorism or terror? You
That's
see, so
right.
it's
I mean,
a
and now it's extremism, isn't it?
Now it's war on extremism. War
very
on
ill-defined, you know.
Yeah. So I think we're in it for the long haul here. They're going to continue to create this pretext to further their military and political control
effectively,
in our countries.
Is Syria a new Iraq?
It's a continuation, basically. You know, it goes even further back. I mean, to Afghanistan, and then, you know, Iraq, and then Syria, and you know, it's going to continue. I mean, we're in for it for a long time. You know, I mean, but I think it's more it's important that we look into, you know, what they're actually fighting, because when they're talking about extremism and they were talking about terrorism, war on terror, you know, and extremism. I mean, this thing isn't just in Syria.
Okay.
This thing is actually very close to home, in London, in America, in Australia. I mean, this war is actually not just in Syria.
That's what I would want to talk about. How does it affect us in the West? But before I do that, I just quickly remind our listeners, you're listening to Straight Talk, and tonight we are discussing the war on Syria and how does it affect us living in the West. Do we have a text? Yeah. Okay, let me just go through the text. Okay, so all right, so it says, although West champions concept of democracy around the world, the Syrian bombing is an example of how it is not a democracy. The state doesn't listen to the public ever, even during Iraq war. Very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you think about it, during the Iraq War, I was old enough to remember that there were 1 million or 500,000 people demonstrating in the streets of London, and in response to that, the then Prime Minister, Mr. Blair, he said, look, I respect the views of these demonstrators, the protesters, but unfortunately I also have a view, and it is very important that Britain's interest comes first, as opposed to the sentiments of the people. He wanted to put Britain first, Britain's national interest.
I remember someone quoted it, sometimes it is undemocratic to be democratic. Yeah. I can't exactly remember the quote.
Democratic to be undemocratic.
Democratic to be undemocratic.
The Algerians, this was said when Algerians
was invaded.
It was basically there was a coup d'etat to establish Islam, Islamic rule, and then the French went in and they destroyed that. And this is when they said this, because they didn't want an Islamic establishment or an authority to take over Algeria.
Okay. Okay. So let's just remind our listeners. You are listening to Middle Path Radio, and today we are discussing the war on Syria. And if you'd like to contact us, you can do so by ringing us, or you can text us 07477080248. Or you can follow us at Middle Path Radio, inshallah. I want to ask the brothers, what do you think about the Western media coverage of Syrian war? Is it biased?
Yeah. And that goes without saying, isn't it? I mean, the propaganda Western media machine, it's always biased and subjective towards real Islam and Muslims.
Abdul Samad?
Of course, it's biased. I mean, what do you call? I mean, they're talking about fighting extremism. They're doing it. Whole media is covering the whole issue exactly like that, where they're creating this picture of Muslims and Islam, and that is the new danger, the new evil, and the ideology and whatnot. And this is we really need to understand. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much we try to even integrate or pretend that we're British or pretend that we're American, or whether we put on an American flag, as a headscarf, at the end of the day, they see us as Muslim first. And that's a good thing, because we need to see ourselves as Muslim first,
So basically, they're linking some of the Islamic values to ISIS, and you find a lot of the blogs or articles.
It's not about
on news.
ISIS. Actually, it's not about ISIS. ISIS is just
because they talk about strict Islam,
a boogeyman, if you like, that they've created, and they want to link Islam to that. So it's an ideological war where they're fighting the true belief, the value, the systems of Islam. Because at the moment, the whole world, I mean, without the Islamic Caliphate or Islamic civilization, in terms of an established society, governance, the West, has absolute freedom to go and do whatever it wants to do anywhere in the world that it wants to do, and they want to maintain the world in that shape, in that form, and the biggest danger that they see is that the Muslims are actually rising, and there is an awakening, and this awakening is not just in the Muslim world, but it's in the West as well.
What I mean
now, this awakening isn't actually terrorism. It isn't actually anything. It's actually Muslims having firm conviction in their Islam as a true way of life, one that is just, one that is human, one that really understands life, and seeks to establish a system of governance where it will establish justice and peace and security. And this is something that is very much missing in the world today, and this is the biggest threat that they feel, and that they need to color this. They need to make out that Islam is this evil ideology that is out there to destroy every white Westerner, and which is not true at all. This is obviously not true at all.
Okay, since the start of the Syrian bombing, we had the Paris attack, and recently the shooting in San Bernardino. In USA, and Leytonstone in London. These two events have labeled. Have been labeled by the media and the government as a terrorist attacks. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about Western media. I have very little trust.
That's why I wanted to discuss a bit more.
I have very little trust in what they put across to the public for public consumption. Why
I'm saying that is because if you look at the Leytonstone
I mean, clearly
attack,
this guy was
mentally ill. Yeah, mentally ill. So
basically the Leytonstone attack is very interesting because why it's interesting is they haven't studied the issue properly, the media. they went into the bandwagon of this is.
That's the
Syria.
point I'm trying to make, because if you look at if you look at what happened is the moment the attack took place, this one chap who took the video and the video
became viral.
He said you ain't no Muslim bruv. And that hashtag actually went viral. It was all over Twitter, and the media quickly flipped it, and they said, "Well, look, this is a terrorist attack." So it happened on Sunday night.
They blew out of proportion completely.
And then after a couple of days, they realized, basically in Channel 4 News,
absolutely,
you had the brother coming in, and he said, "Look, 2 weeks ago, we reported our brother to the police saying he's got mental illnesses. They need to deal with that." Yeah?
Absolutely. So do you see?
So that's the point I want to maybe.
Yeah, but that's the bit the media is not interested in. That's the bit the politicians are not interested in.
That's right.
You know, so what they want to do, like I say, it's an ideological war that they will try and link anything to Islam, so long as it's bad and so long as it's evil. Yeah, you know, I'm not saying that all Muslims are perfect or all Muslims are, you know. But any community, any society has, you know,
the rotten apples.
So it's unfair to link.
But exactly. So the
link.
question is the media coverage, you know, at all balanced? And it is absolutely not. It is absolutely not balanced. You know, I mean, some of the other things I maybe want to highlight. You know, like this hysteria that they've created. You know, where terrorism. You know, the whole world is in a danger of terrorism, you know. The fact of the matter is, you know, there's more people that die from so many other issues that the government is not willing to look at, even just not interested. I mean, if there's a report that came out, and you know, it's like in the US, there's 589,430 cancer deaths.
Wow, a year.
Yes, and they're not interested. You know, where's the war on cancer? You know, where there isn't a war on cancer, is there? You know,
you've got the charities.
There's actually 23,000 people just died from flu. You know, look how many people, you know, in this Christmas are going to, you know, be homeless in the cold. What is the government to deal with? Exactly. You know, and this is the nature of capitalist societies. You know, they will go out there and they will, you know, wage wars for, you know, material resources. They will wage wars for corporate companies. But there are people that are dying from poverty, from hunger within their own, you know, countries that are not even cared for. You know, do you know how many elderly people there are in this country that haven't spoken to anybody?
Yeah.
You know, for like months, literally months, and.
Well, there were some cases where they died and they were left there for like 6-7 months, and then they discovered that this person passed away. And
this is, you know, this is the reality. Okay. You know, so and you know how much one of these bombs cost? You know, the one of these bombs that Britain is going to actually drop in Syria. You know, you only need a couple of bombs to really help all these homeless people. You know, you know, that are dying. You know, people that are starving. You only need a couple of bombs. But who's going to drop those ones?
I hope you're not suggesting to drop on them.
No, not drop. But you know, the you know what it costs. Can you imagine? But look how.
And how many people were killed in the First World War, in Iraq War, the Afghanistan War? How many thousands?
Okay, on a serious note, the comments made by Donald Trump that all the Muslims in USA should carry an ID card. And recently he said that they should be banned from coming into America. How should we respond?
Yeah, this is nothing new. I mean, if you look at the way they treated the black people back in the 60s and the 70s, the ideological racist nation, Britain as well, similar. And what needs to be understood is if it takes Mr. Trump,
I don't think you can say the whole nation is racist.
Well, let me tell you, actually,
the establishment.
Actually, if you look at what Donald Trump has said, there's actually I think about 1/3 a quarter.
Well, he's got a huge followers.
Yeah, he's got a huge following.
And
I mean, that's
and when he said that, they were all cheering,
point.
and that's
the first point. And the second point is, though all these other people that are saying, this is wrong, like you can't say these things, but the fact of the matter is, when it comes to policy, they're actually following the same policies through. So they don't want to talk about it, but the fact of the matter is, the same blood runs through their veins as well. And in terms of policies, that's exactly what they're doing anyway.
I just wanted to highlight.
They're talking about closing down mosques. They're talking about registering.
The attacks on mosques is going up, by the way. Anyway.
Exactly.
I just want to highlight, if for our listeners, is that look, Nazi Germany, Hitler, he introduced ID cards. Yeah, and he also introduced like a section in the Jews, so they can't come into certain part of the in Germany. So these is this a repeat of history?
Absolutely, this is what I was trying to say before. That this is definitely a repeat of history. That the way the German fascists treated the Jews, it's eventually. I mean, obviously, I don't want to sound cynical, but if you look at it, this is similar things are happening now even in this country with all the prevent legislation. They're actually cornering Muslims to be demonized. They're effectively demonizing the Muslim community.
So do you think he is a product of Islamophobic rhetoric that's coming from the media outlets?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay. There is a rise of fascist right-wing parties taking lead in the Western Hemisphere. What is the future of Muslims even in the West, especially groups like Le Pen in France? What is the future of the Muslims living in the West?
I mean, it's actually expected. What you'll find is that with the attacks in the Muslim world, whether it be the drone or the manned aircraft and the laws that are coming into like the Western countries, specifically targeting the Muslims, this is really just to suppress the awakening of the Muslim Ummah, where because Muslims are realizing and they're really going back to their creed, their religion, and this is what they're trying to suppress. And naturally, the response you will get from the West is a Nazi type response, is the far right response.
Well, basically the fascist right-wing parties are taking the lead because of the refugees, because of some of the terrorist attacks that's taking place, and obviously there's internal problems as well. In Britain, if you look at some of the countries in Europe, they are having some issues. So, are Muslims, are they blaming Muslims for their own internal issues?
Yeah, of course they do. They blame the Muslims for generally any migrant.
Because that was the case with Germany, Nazi Germany. That they had to really blame someone.
Yeah, on a local level, they do definitely blame the Muslims. They think the Muslims have come into this country. They've taken away their council flats and their benefits at the expense of the
refugees.
The refugees coming here at the expense of the indigenous population.
They also wanted to link the Paris bombing with the refugees.
Yeah, that's right. So this is why if you look at after the attack, Paris attack, the French president announced, he declared that there would be no refugee coming to his country. He made it very clear. He's effectively closed the borders to the refugees. So it's definitely having a direct effect on the people, and they are concerned about mass migration.
When they actually push forward for these legislations and these new measures, it doesn't to me it doesn't show strength on their part. Rather, to me, it shows failure for them to really convince the Muslims of their values and their sort of like liberty and freedom and all these things, which they don't themselves follow, when it doesn't suit them. And which is something that they will go out there and preach to the world. But
they claim they are a very tolerant society, that they tolerate, other religions, minority groups.
Of course.
Is that the case?
It's all a claim, isn't it? It's all a claim. But over the last year or so, it has demonstrated very, very clearly, if anybody had any doubt, You know, it has demonstrated very clearly that they haven't. And the fact of the matter is, they're unwilling to have an honest debate about their values, you know, because I tell you one thing, Muslims are very ready to discuss. Muslims, whether it be in the East or the West, you know, Muslims are ready to debate and discuss some of these ideals that they champion across the world.
Do you think the media should come to the Muslims and say, look, before you go on, they should come to the Muslim community?
But they're talking about silencing the Muslims. You know, these legislations. I mean, if you look at like spying on the Muslim community, reporting anybody who has any Islamic tendency. I mean, there's this principle that they've laid out, and this principle is the more Islamic a person is, the more somebody who subscribes to Islam is, the more dangerous or more extremist he is. And this is the guideline, if you like, that is being applied by teachers and doctors and things like this, you know, who are now targeting, you know, your ordinary, even like nursery children or primary school children are being targeted by these.
So are they afraid of the ideas of Islam?
They're afraid to learn the truth. They're afraid to really, you know.
It's a direct attack on Islam. I mean, because think about it. Why have they resorted to such drastic measures? I mean, think about this.
When you say direct attack on Islam, do you mean the ideas?
Ideas. Okay. The direct attack on Islam as an ideological alternative.
Is it because that the Muslims generally cannot integrate into the British system? Yeah,
Muslims have difficulty in integrating.
This is why in Syria, for example, they've actually found it very difficult. They've tried so hard to find somebody to replace Assad, and they found it very difficult because the reality on the ground is that the people were for Islam. People actually, you know, made that very clear. Maybe it wasn't the same in other parts of the Middle East, like maybe in Iraq.
When they had their Arab Spring.
And when they had the Arab Spring, that's right. But Syria, you know, was interestingly a place where the call for Islam was very loud and very clear. And they have maintained that over the last four and a half years. And this is what they're worried about. And now, this is why they're willing to now reconsider Assad.
Okay, yeah.
So you know, and they just don't want the Muslims to the right to self-determination. If the Muslims should choose an Islamic way of life, it shall never be acceptable.
Are they? I mean, in the media, they always say ISIS. They, they are claiming caliphate. Yeah, but do they recognize that there is a concept of caliphate, a real caliphate?
They know caliphate too well. I mean, they were instrumental in its destruction. You know, they do realize caliphate will really counter the balance at the at the moment. The West has, you know, absolute free reign over the globe, you know, without any interference.
Yeah.
You know, and they do realize. I mean, Russia is not, you know, nothing. You know.
So is Russia, America, and Britain, obviously their objectives are,
I mean,
what they say is that, look, we want to get rid of this evil ideology.
Well, what is
that's ISIS.
What is this ideology? Well, why don't we have a debate?
But they have defined it. They said, what they defined it, they've defined that to be that, look, these guys are crazy. They want to kill people. They want to, behead people and all that stuff.
Who allowed them to become? Who allowed them to become so big and powerful in Middle East? Think about it. Under whose control were they initially? When they were destroying Saddam Hussein, what happened then after that?
Well, these are the ones that defected from Saddam's
but who assisted
and they
them?
formed.
Who assisted them? Who encouraged them? Who created and
so
who financially?
So you're saying we should do our research and maybe look into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Who financially?
I just want to come back and basically, should Muslims have their own media? I mean, how can Muslims, be able to discuss freely? I know we have this radio station, alhamdulillah, where we're able to discuss and speak straight
Can
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just read
absolutely.
this comment? As
Yeah,
we're
sure.
Talking about
Yeah.
what the ummah should do or can do.
Yeah.
This is actually a comment from the other side of the globe, from Australia.
Yeah. Go for it.
And it says, our biggest challenge in the West is our own complacency. The self-imposed bubble is bursting, and the little attention we are increasingly receiving is a small reminder the Western world looks at us primarily as Muslims before anything else. No amount of feigning or appeasing is going to change that, and nor should it. Muslims in other parts of the world are not bombed because of their falafel, imprisoned because of the hummus, or starved because of their salwar kameez. They are hounded and targeted because they refuse to let go of their deen despite centuries of horrific encounters with the West. What Muslim in the West are starting to overtly experience is a reminder the privileges we enjoy in the West are built upon the suffering inflicted upon the rest of the world, not in spite of it. It is also a reminder to not to take our present ability to speak and act for granted, requiring us all to redouble our efforts to champion the Ummah's cause.
So effectively, encouraging us to speak out more, maybe look at other ways, other mediums, other ways of
That's
channeling or discussing our ideas. I mean, Middle Path Radio is one of them. So please, ring in, text us, inshallah.
We shouldn't expect. I just wanted to make a point about the media. These, if you look at all the media outlets, they're owned by multinational corporations who have their own vested financial and political interests, and we should not expect them to serve the Muslims. In fact, they will do a disservice to the Muslims. So, absolutely, I agree with you that we do need our own media outlets. Because think about why would they provide an objective, impartial coverage of Islam and Muslim? Because the very nature of their existence and their objective is based on serving their corporate interest and their shareholders.
Well, it makes sense.
Think about it.
Okay.
I think this comment actually reminds us, or should remind us, that we have this opportunity where we can be the voice for the Ummah. I mean, while we can, we should utilize this. I mean, the Muslims in Syria don't have a voice. We are their voice, and we're going to raise their concern, their issues, as much as we can.
So
for as long as we can.
So, what is, in your view, the correct response from the Muslim community in the UK? What should be the correct response to all what we've discussed?
The correct response is that we take no blame for all these things that they blame us for. Whether
so we shouldn't apologize.
We have no need to apologize. We have done nothing wrong that we need to apologize. If anybody needs to apologize, it's the Western governments that need to apologize for all
why I'm saying that
activities all over the world.
Why I'm saying that is after the Leytonstone knife attack, you had the Leytonstone Masjid committee. They came out and they said, look, we condemn this, we condemn this, and they did not, it was nothing to do with the Muslims.
It was nothing to do with the Muslims, because you have many mental ill patients across the country scattered around, and they commit
churches
offenses.
do not come out
absolutely.
and
there's no
apologize and condemn the
definitely
white racist knife attacks that take place almost every day.
This
or the black community.
Absolutely. Or the Chinese community, or any other community. You can get a mentally ill patient in any community. So this has got nothing to do with
Muslims. Are the Muslims fueling
this?
That's the point.
Some would say that's the exclusive right of a white supremacist terrorist. Is a mental case.
See, the thing is, we're so eager to come forward immediately when something happens. This is where we need to actually buckle. We need to pull our socks sometimes, and we really need to unite and understand and educate ourselves. This incident's got nothing to. This latent incident has got nothing to do with Muslims and Islam. And you have these mosque leaders coming forward and apologizing. Why are they apologizing when he himself was not responsible?
That's why I'm saying, what is the correct?
What he was doing?
What is the correct response from our community?
So
because we can't consolidate these ideas.
Yeah. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand the reality properly.
The danger in that is an indirect way of sort of like acknowledging some responsibility, which we're not responsible for. So we shouldn't have to come out and apologize and condemn and all these things. You know, this is quite insulting, actually. You know, and we need to feel that this, you know, that if anybody should ask or demand that we do, then, you know, we should let them know that we are deeply offended by such a demand.
Thank you, Brother Qudus.
Yeah, what I was going to say, we have so much to offer the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community, that under Islam, that we wouldn't have this type of wars for financial gain. We would only have justified wars where it's there's laws of wars here. Here you only have capitalists who are money hungry, mad. They've gone crazy. The few that are stealing the resources of the world. So what we should do, we should articulate to our Muslims and non-Muslim counterparts in this country that we need to provide an alternative narrative in a way that Islam is a complete way of life. It's a system of governance which establishes peace, security, and harmony for everyone, whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim. It doesn't matter.
Okay, Abdul Samad?
Yeah,
I mean, the correct response from the Muslim community, how as a community we can voice our opinion and have an impact on the media, on in general the community, really.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of education that is needed in the community, and we need the right sort of people to really represent us. At the moment, because we're so disunited, you know, we get all sorts of views and opinions and different groups representing and making comments and whatnot. Yeah, and all of this, you know, and
it doesn't help,
does it?
And
the government and the media are very selective. They will take what they like, and they will, create a picture of the Muslim community, you know, as they wish, really, and they will always find somebody to sort of like back that.
So what I can conclude from this, that we need to have a unified voice. Yeah. And we need to think about what we say before we approach the media, because the media can manipulate very easily.
Definitely,
and
they will take things out of context.
They will definitely. They have taken out of context.
With all this as well, I mean, there's a growing pressure that they're talking about reforming Islam itself. You know, they're talking about, you know, the problem is Islam, and therefore it needs to be reformed as they did with Christianity.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, there was actually a conference in UAE, and the participants were some very renowned sort of like scholars that are normally, you know, quite looked up to by a big chunk of our Muslim community. And they are actively engaged in now reforming Islam, where they want to, abolish some of the rules, which are very clearly stated in the Quran. You know, like these are the hudud, and other things as well. So, I mean, this reform agenda. I mean, we need to ask the question: where is it coming from? Who are we trying to appease? What, you know, is it because Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says now is the time to reform? Or is it because we're facing this growing pressure from, you know, those people that dislike Islam, and we are now looking to please them, or conform, get Islam to conform with, you know, secularism.
Yeah.
You know, so this is the thing, and these are dangers, because in our community we find a lot of feeble-minded Muslims who will follow these opinions and who will then, you know, try to blend in, if you like, with their Western counterparts. But I say, you know, like, as Muslims, you know, we will never abandon Islam, because we cannot abandon Islam. That is, you know, something that our heart and mind, you know, you just can't let go of something that your heart and your mind is convinced of. And we're telling the world that we are actually convinced of Islam, and we're actually not convinced of your Western style secular liberal democracy. You know, we're convinced of Islam.
So liberalism is in a default.
Please come and talk to us. Your values are actually not universal as you like to claim they are. They're not universal. And the whole world, you know, the Muslim world has stood up to that, and is challenging you. Is telling you that we don't want your values. We love our Islam and we want to live by our Islam. Please leave us alone.
Okay,
that's what they're saying.
On this note, we'll have to end with time's up. Inshallah, I would like to thank our guests for taking the time out to come in and discuss this topic. I'm sure we have gained and benefited much from these discussions. Jazakallah khair to the brothers. And many thanks to our listeners. And I hope you can join us next week as we will be discussing prevent strategy. So please don't miss out. Next week we want to discuss prevent, inshallah. You can follow us on Twitter at Middle Path Radio and continue with this discussion. Also, if there are any topics or issues that you would like us to cover, please contact us via our Twitter account. And again, thank you for listening to Middle Path Radio. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Middle Path Radio, your number one online Islamic talk station.